First, former pop star Linda Ronstadt. You remember You're No Good, you're no good, baby, you're no good. Well, Linda's joined the long list of celebrities and other public figures who've berated President Bush for his lack of intelligence. But it's not just singers and movie stars who are suggesting that George Bush's mental weakness is damaging America's credibility at home and abroad. Ronstadt said this earlier. The Dixie Chicks said they were embarrassed he was from Texas. Well, I'm embarrassed George Bush is from the United States. The president is an idiot. He's enormously incompetent on both the domestic and international scenes. That is no doubt a sentiment that is shared in some of the capitals of our friends and foes alike. Maybe because the president has such a long history of public gaffes. But is that evidence that George W. Bush is stupid or just inarticulate? Take a look and decide for yourself.
I think tide turning, as I remember, I was raised in the desert, but tides kind of it's easy to see a tide turn. Did I say those words? No question that the enemy has tried to spread sectarian violence. They use violence as a tool to do that. We need an energy bill that encourages consumption. Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we. We must never stop thinking about how best to defend our country. I'm the decider, and I decide what is best. The United States of America is engaged in a war against a extremist group of folks. Families is where our nation finds hope, where wings take dream. If you don't stand for anything, you don't stand for anything. If you don't stand for something, you don't stand for anything. Fool me once. Shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again. In my State of the Union, or my speech to the nation, whatever you want to call it, at the high school level, and find out that the literacy level of our children are appalling. I hear there's rumors on the internets that we're going to have a draft. You're working hard to put food on your family. I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully. Tribal sovereignty means that. It's sovereign. You've been given sovereignty, and you're viewed as a sovereign entity. Okay. And therefore, the relationship between the federal government and tribes is one between sovereign entities. They underestimated the compassion of our country. I think they underestimated the will and determination of the commander-in-chief, too.
Sounds like me. So is the president intelligent? And do we need a brilliant president, or just somebody who surrounds himself with bright people? Here to help answer that question, Lawrence O'Donnell, a political analyst, also John Funn from OpinionJournal.com. Now, John, it isn't just about Linda Ronstadt. I've heard Republicans and Democrats start saying this privately, liberals and conservatives. Heck, Frenchmen and friends alike talk privately about George W. Bush, and they're saying what these music stars and rock stars are saying, that George Bush's lack of gravitas is hurting America at home and embarrassing us abroad. Is that a fair question to ask?
It's the wrong question. Look, George Bush wakes up every morning, and for the whole day he arm wrestles the English language, and he often loses. He's inarticulate. That is not the same thing as being stupid. The inarticulate can often be shrewd, and the fluent can often be fatuous. I think one of the people...
So he just has a failure. He cannot communicate well.
Well,
is that what you're telling me?
Voltaire once said that common sense is both rare and a lot more important to successful leadership than intelligence. And I agree. Here's the thing. The author of Bushisms, Jacob Weisberg, who's the liberal editor of Slate.com, he has plowed through almost everything George Bush has ever said. He concluded that Bush has a linguistic deficit, and he said that's no sign that there's any lack of mental capacity there.
Well,
so
there are
two different problems here. He's inarticulate, but he is not stupid. And I have to tell you, as our foreign policy may be a little bit of trouble right now, but we're presiding over a nation with 4.8% unemployment and 2.5% inflation.
Okay, you're talking about foreign policy, though. John, one of the president's former aides who worked with the president on foreign policy and has been close with him for a long time told me recently that he's intellectually shallow and one of the most incurious public figures this man had ever met.
Joe,
and I hear that from congressmen. I hear it from
let me
senators.
tell you what
I hear it from staff members. Shouldn't
Joe,
that concern us?
Yes. Let me tell you two things that do concern me. Someone once told me a long time ago, George Bush is a great guy, but the smirk is real. There's a smart aleck nature to him, and I would say while he's intelligent, he is not always imaginative. And I wish there were a little bit more imagination and curiosity.
Right, and I agree with you. You know, we're not the only ones who've noticed George Bush's blunders. Recently, The Daily Show picked up on his obsession with food.
President Bush was overseas in Germany as events unfolded. Here is his press conference with Chancellor Angela Merkel. Germany, where he wasted no time addressing the many troubling developments.
I'm looking forward to the feast you're going to have tonight. I understand I may have the honor of slicing the pig.
I'm just going to assume that that is some sort of euphemism for solving the Middle East crisis.
And I guess that's about all. We discussed a lot of things, in other words. And thank you for having me. Looking forward to that pig tonight.
Does it concern you that the Beirut airport has been bombed? And do you see a risk of triggering a wider war? And on Iran, they've so far refused to respond. Is it now past the deadline, or do they still have more time to respond?
I thought you were going to ask about the pig.
You know, Lawrence, Democrats and liberals love to talk about how stupid Ronald Reagan was, and then this book came out of Reagan's letters, and they changed their opinion overnight. Do you think the same thing could happen with George W. Bush?
Well, boy, this guy is so easy to make fun of. I mean, possibly the easiest ever at this point. The prejudice against Reagan, Joe, was almost entirely the fact that he was an actor. There was a presumption that he's dumb because he used to be an actor. There wasn't any real overt evidence that you couldn't run this kind of set of clips on Ronald Reagan. You just didn't get this kind of gaffe from him in a consistent basis. You know, I mean, John Fund wants to say the president is intelligent. I don't know the president. I don't know how you can make the judgment that he is intelligent without working very closely with him, because he doesn't make a lot of public exhibition of a dazzling intelligence. It just isn't there.
You know, Lawrence, it's interesting. If you look at clips of George Bush, though, when he was governor of Texas, he seems so much more confident. He seems so much more self-assured. And it's almost like the more he stumbles over his tongue, the more he realizes that he's maybe overmatched by the English language, and it seems he's losing confidence by the day. He's getting worse instead of better.
It looks like he's overmatched by the job. It looks like he's overwhelmed by it, and it's just out of his league, especially ever since Katrina. From Katrina onward, his imagery feeds a level of incompetence that is very unusual. And so everything he does now, he's allowed no margin of error on these kinds of gaffes now, whereas if he'd had a bunch of real policy successes to point to, and if Iraq was a real policy success, that guy could fall down everywhere he went.
And nobody's paying attention.
Ultimately, we're having this conversation.
Well, hold on one second. I want to ask you this, though, John. You can talk about that, but also talk about how Republicans, it seems like most Republican presidents, we just showed a shot of Gerald Ford. You know, he was painted as a dunce. Ronald Reagan painted as a dunce.
Eisenhower.
I remember Eisenhower, hearing how stupid Eisenhower was, which, of course, the guy was about as shrewd and calculated as you could be. And now they're saying it about George Bush. But I think George Bush is in a league by himself.
Well,
I don't think he has the intellectual depth as these other people. But do we need that as a president?
Well, I think we would be a lot better off criticizing the policies. I've criticized many of the policies. But, you know, let's put this into perspective. You mentioned all the Republicans that have developed a reputation for being dim-witted. I just have a question. Obviously, intelligence is not congregated just on one side of the political spectrum. Can anyone name me a well-known Democrat in modern history who's ever developed a popular media image as being stupid or dim-witted? You can't come up with one. There aren't any. So it's only Republicans who develop this dumb image. Some of them really are dumb, but some of them is just a substitute for argument because you don't want to argue their policies, so you just dismiss them as being stupid.
Well,
there are no Democrats who have this image.
This is a fascinating conversation. I'd like to continue it later. Lawrence O'Donnell, John Fund, thanks for being with me. And I just want to say one other thing. Sometimes you can have somebody like Michael Dukakis that gets too far down in the weeds. Or Jimmy Carter. I remember hearing stories about Dukakis reading Swedish land use books while on vacations, or becoming so depressed after reading about SALT II treaties that he basically had to go to bed for a couple of days. We don't want that either. But we do need a president who I think is intellectually curious, and that's the big question, whether George W. Bush has the intellectual curiousness, if that's a word, to continue leading this country over the next couple years. Hey, coming up next on Scarborough. An idiot. That's the subject of tonight's Real Deal. Now, new and old media alike are buzzing about last week's Scarborough Country segment on the president's mental prowess. In Sunday's Washington Post, Peter Baker wrote this, quote, Bush advisors said that the president's political weakness has encouraged soft supporters and quiet skeptics to speak out. Few have struck a nerve more than Scarborough. Struck a nerve is an understatement. I've been blasted by Republican loyalists for asking whether Linda Ronstadt's description of the president as an idiot was out of line. That question was important not because another Hollywood liberal was blasting Bush, but because conservatives have been doing the same thing privately since the Harriet Miers and Katrina debacles of last fall. Well, and because of the steady roar of Bushisms like these seen daily on late-night TV.
For every fatal shooting, there were roughly 3 non-fatal shootings. And folks, this is unacceptable in America. It's just unacceptable. And we're going to do something about it. We shouldn't fear a world that is more interacted. It was not always a given that the United States and America would have a close relationship. We look forward to hearing your vision so we can more better do our job. Too many good docs are getting out of business. Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country. I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully. You're working hard to put food on your family. They underestimated the compassion of our country. Let me finish my question, please. These hands going up. I'm kind of getting old and, you know, just getting into my peroration. Look it up.
Look it up. Now, I know the president. He's no idiot. But history's also proven that he doesn't like listening to dissent. He lacks intellectual curiosity, and he inspires fear among allies every time he gets behind a microphone doing a press conference. Now, with Iraq in flames, Iran on the rise, Afghanistan in crisis mode, Hezbollah on ascent, Israel in disarray, and North Korea testing missiles, we got to have a president who projects confidence. Right now, this president is not. I was a conservative when I ran for Congress in 1994. I am a conservative now. I was against big deficits when Bill Clinton was running Washington, and I'm against them now that Republicans are running D.C. I was attacked by sycophants and suck-ups when I dared to criticize Newt Gingrich for backing down on spending reductions and tax cuts when he was Speaker of the House. And I was attacked 2 years ago when I wrote a book that took on big spending Republicans. History proved me right before, and history is going to prove me right again. When in doubt, friends, always choose country over party. And time will prove you did not only what was best for your country, but also did what was best for your party. And that's tonight's Real Deal. Let's now bring in a guy who had to deal with my self-righteous conservative rantings in Congress. He is Terry Holt, a GOP strategist. Terry, I know you know this president. He is no idiot, but he's also no Ronald Reagan. Why does he have so much trouble behind a microphone?
Well, let me just first say, I don't think that everyday Republicans and Democrats would really prefer to have their political debate shot through with profanity and invective and petty insults like the word idiot. To bestow that on the president, I think, demeans the presidency, and I'm not sure it has a place. I think that people will turn off their televisions if they hear that their political debate has devolved to that kind of thing. I think being president is the hardest job in the world. I think giving speeches a year and having to be picked apart by thousands of journalists every day, I'm not sure that anybody in the world would be able to get through a speech or a live interview like I have to do occasionally with you without making a few mistakes. And in this day's world, with the internet and with all of our ability to go in and pull little pieces of this and that out, my goodness, nobody would be able to live under that kind of scrutiny.
Well, Terry, I understand exactly what you're saying, and it is the toughest job in the world, a job that I wouldn't want to have.
Well,
because it is
Joe,
so difficult, and you are so picked apart. But Terry, I mean, I understand everything you're saying, but I ain't talking about Linda Ronstadt and Michael Moore going after this president. I'm talking about what rank-and-file conservative Republicans have been saying in Washington, D.C. since Katrina, since Harriet
I think
Miers.
That's right.
Hold on, I just want to clarify this.
Sure.
That conservatives that are running Washington behind the scenes are saying this about the president. Why?
As you said, and I think that with 80-some days left until election, I think we need to quit whining, moaning, and complaining and get out there and fight for what we believe. I want my aggressive president back. I want him, like he did in 2002, to go out and punch a few Democrats in the nose and talk about the nightmare, the policy nightmare that would occur if the Democrats were to take over this government with the higher taxes. We'd stop spying on the terrorists if the Democrats were in charge. We need to lay out the very clear choices that the American people have. But I'll tell you what.
I understand, Terry. I just got to ask you, though. I want you to confirm, though, that Republicans are saying this quietly behind the scenes, aren't they?
Well, I don't think that it takes too much digging to find people that are unsatisfied with the political state of America at this point. You don't have to be in D.C. to be unhappy with the way things have gone. But in fact, the election is about a choice. It's about a choice between two very different views of the world, between two different sets of policies. And so
I understand that.
Is there an anxiety in America? There certainly is. Is there a budget deficit that's too large? There certainly is. But, Joe, in fact, to protect this country, to wage a war on terror, it's been expensive. Conservatives haven't been happy with the spending of this government. I'm not sure that anybody really is. But this new world after 9/11, I don't think anyone would question that we spend as much as is necessary to protect this country.
Well, okay, Terry, I understand that. We're running out of time. We can debate
Can
also
I make a
how much
suggestion
money.
to you, Joe?
Well,
Terry,
you got to let me ask you. Terry, you got to let me ask you this question, because I agree with you on spending money to protect the homeland, but also domestic spending skyrocketed. We have a Medicare prescription drug benefit that's cost us $7 trillion that nobody understands. But getting back to Bush, I want to know, why was the president, you talked about 2002. We all saw him in 2001. You look at clips of him when he was governor of Texas. This guy was confident. He was in charge. He controlled the camera when he was in press conferences. That's not happening now. He seems to be getting worse with time, and that's what's so troubling when he has 2 years left. What's going on?
Yeah, I think, he's got a good gut, and we need the president to follow his gut, get back out on the campaign trail, because, ultimately there's nobody else better at articulating the vision and the inspiration that we need to get back on our feet. Go back to the convention speech in 2004. The last 5 minutes of that speech, if you play it, it will motivate you. It will make you think of Ronald Reagan.
No doubt.
And so, in fact, we do have that in our president, and it is time that we see more of it. But come on, we don't need to call him an idiot. I think that's way out of bounds. And I do, though. You looked great in the Washington Post on Saturday.
I looked great. You're talking about that stock
newspaper more often.
That stock MSNBC photo that makes me look like a mortician has gotten a hold of me. And yeah, it's absolutely horrible. In fact, after I saw it, I actually told our people,
if I was your press secretary, I'd make sure you had a brand new photo.
Get me a brand new photo that actually makes me look alive. Hey, Terry, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Joe.
I greatly appreciate it. And still to come.